so much for the warm welcome and the invitation to share my family story with you today. On behalf of cancer patients and their loved ones around the world, thank you, Eureka, for the important work that you're doing to help make a positive difference in the lives of those affected by this insidious disease. Now, along the lines of what Cole was just talking about, I'd like to invite you to share your why. What inspires you to show up to work every day in your best self and fight to cure cancer? So I'd like you to take just a few seconds to do this with someone sitting next to you. Could be a short sentence for the name or names of loved ones affected by this disease. You're going to hear my why in just a bit. So we're going to start now. Thank you. I wanted to do this to underscore that we're a family, we're a tribe of people that share a common vision and mission, and to honor the work that you're doing. So important. There's a favorite movie of mine. It's called The Bear. And this is not the most recent bear movie that was done. It was about cooking or something. This one was filmed in the 80s in the Canadian Rockies. And it's about a 1,500-pound grizzly bear. And he's being hunted by a trophy hunter. And there's a scene in the movie where the hunter finds himself at the edge of a cliff, taking a break, enjoying the view, and his rifle is away from him. And he hears something behind him, and he turns around, and just a few feet away, there's the bear staring at him. Now, the bear has two choices: have mercy or kill. And that's what it feels like 24/7 for those affected by cancer. Now, Greg and I had a 25-year love story. Greg was a very talented artist. He was an avid surfer his whole life. He loved the ocean. He loved any body of water, really. He also had an irrational obsession with any sport involving balls. So football, baseball, basketball, golf, you name it. If he wasn't playing it, he was certainly watching it on TV. It kind of sounds like I'm driving a golden retriever. He was a practical jokester, and he didn't take life too seriously. And he was my best friend and the love of my life. Our cancer journey started in 2016. Greg was a healthy guy. And he had hepatitis C, though. And hep C went undetected and untreated for a number of years. And the doctor at the time said, you know, Greg, you're healthy. I don't want to make you sick. And back then, to clear hep C, you had to take that interferon cocktail, which is really icky. And the new class of drugs came out to treat hep C. And he said, Sarah, I am sick. I want to get this out of my system. And so he saw a new doctor, and that day put him on Zapatier, and it cleared him of his hepatitis C. So we went off to Maui to celebrate our new lease on a healthy life. And when we got back, that new doctor did a baseline scan on his liver and said, I'm sorry, you've got two tumors. You've got hepatocellular carcinoma, liver cancer. We were shocked and terrified. Never even heard of hepatocellular carcinoma, let alone be able to pronounce it. So the first thing I did when I got into the car from that appointment is I consulted with Dr. Zuckerberg and the University of Google. Never do that. Ever. You know, docs go to school forever to learn about this stuff. And here you're given a diagnosis like this, and all of the treatment decisions are on you. It's daunting. And 50% of it is the clinical stuff. The other 50% is equally important. That's the emotional support, understanding the disease, finding a treatment, finding a doctor, finding the right cancer center. And don't get me started with healthcare insurance. And I didn't want Greg to worry about any of that stuff. I wanted him to worry about his golf game and keeping hope alive. So I took it all on, and I became overwhelmed, and especially surprised at the lack of patient education. And that's when I was introduced to Blue Fairy, and they helped me navigate this journey. And you'll hear me talk a little bit about Blue Fairy in the end, but we decided on liver transplant. Liver transplant was going to give Greg the best survival odds. To get listed for an organ transplant is a whole other talk. You have to prove you are Superman or Superwoman, right? but Greg was healthy and we were able to list in San Francisco, but wait times are long here in California, especially. And so we multi-listed to New Orleans at Ochsner Medical Center, where they do the majority of liver transplants in the world. And during this time, he had to have bridge treatments to ensure that the tumors did not grow out of transplant criteria. And they took a lot out of me. They took a lot out of Greg. Cancer, it's not just the patient that gets cancer, the family gets cancer. So he had TACE, chemoembolization treatments, Y90 radiation treatments, and it worked. Those tumors stayed within transplant criteria. And we got the call, you are number one on the list, come on down to New Orleans. So we moved there with my sister and her husband for support. And we were there for 8 weeks. And during that 8-week period, he had 4 donor offers. Twice he was on the table ready for surgery. Unfortunately, none of those organs that were harvested were viable for Greg. And he had an MRI and the tumors had grown and they said, I'm sorry, but you're delisted. Go home and you've got 6 months to live. Devastation. We were at the low point in our journey. But this is where the work that you do here at Eureka comes in, because devastation turned into hope, sweet hope. And we were able to get under the care of Dr. Katie Kelly at UCSF. She is a brilliant physician, now a part of our family. And she leads clinical trials for liver cancer. And so Greg was able to get enrolled in Himalaya, in the immunotherapy clinical trial, and he won the lottery because he drew the arm that enabled him to receive both drugs. And he responded. The tumor shrank. Boy, was that a happy day. So we attacked that bucket list. Now, being that lifelong surfer, Greg, his dream car was a Ford Woody wagon. So he bought a 1947 Ford Woody wagon and named it Woodrow. This thing was massive. I couldn't even reach the gas pedals of this thing. Went to Maui, our happy place. Went to Montana, our first rodeo. Visited our loved ones. Built an artist studio in the backyard for him to create. And boy, did he ever. And he got his first and only tattoo. He got the word cancer tattooed on his middle finger. I know, it still cracks me up. Side effects are hard and terrifying. The list is long. Pain is another one that I didn't put up here, but pain became really difficult to manage. Fatigue, loss of appetite, weight loss. Greg was 6'4" and weighed 210 pounds at the start of this. And he went down to 145 at the end of it. Blood pressure fluctuations, boy, up and down. His liver had grown over part of his bile duct, because probably a treatment effect from the bridge treatments. Infections, he went into sepsis twice. Kidney complications eventually, and then internal bleeding. Medications changed so often. It was like whack-a-mole with these side effects. Oh, I'm going to put you on this drug to combat that. And it was like they changed every week. And we had those discussions. You want to continue to do this, quality over length of life. And Greg always said, oh, I'm going to stay ahead of because of the science that's emerging in this disease. And due to the good work that these companies are doing, I'm gonna beat it. And so he continued on. But then the treatment stopped working. He was placed on lenvatinib as the next course, Lenvima. He responded to that. And then in the last year of his life, he had 4 very scary episodes, trips to the ED, OR, predominantly because of internal bleeding. And I don't know why, but these episodes always happen in the middle of the night or on the weekend. It's a thing. And we live in Los Gatos. His care center was in San Francisco, and that's a distance, right? And so we were always stuck in the community hospital in Los Gatos, and they're ill-equipped to handle a case like Greg's. But we muscled through that last year. The last episode was December of 2019. And we were stuck in the ICU for weeks in Los Gatos. We couldn't figure out why we couldn't get a bed in San Francisco. It became January of 2020. Well, we know what was boiling in January of 2020, and that was COVID. But he finally got into the care of his care team in San Francisco, got a bed there, and that's when he said no more treatments. And he passed away just a day later. That's how fragile he was. But in the course of his disease, he taught us all how to live. Now, I've been asked to give insights. There's so many. There's a few here. And I'm very honored to be invited to mentor others that have followed in our path. And so these are some of the things that I share with them and also physicians. And, we've got to do a better job with prevention and educate those physicians on the front line that are seeing these patients with hepatitis, especially, get them screened early and get them treated early. Get these physicians knowledgeable on the fact that hepatitis can lead to cancer. We were never told that ever. And ensure that they know about the technology available to treat liver cancer today. When we were first diagnosed in 2016, there was just sorafenib. There was just that one, and then transplant resection. That was it. How many do we have now? How many treatments? Oh my goodness. It's exciting. So many treatments, but there's a lot of confusion out there. So we've got to do a better job at educating the medical community on screening and what can be done. It's important to find the right fit, the right cancer center, of course, and also get a second opinion. A lot of people I talk to are really hesitant to do that. But physicians expect that. This is your life. Patient is the captain of the ship, and the care team is the crew. And discuss priorities all throughout the journey. Is it quality or length of life? Because it changes. This is where the healthcare system is so broken. Dr. Waite, we were just talking about this. It's really common. The lack of communication is astonishing to me in this day and age, especially here in Silicon Valley. Come on. It's very common for patients to be seen by multiple physicians. Greg had a primary care doc, an oncologist, a hepatologist, a cardiologist, endocrinologist, a nephrologist. I used to joke that the only thing that's missing here is our family veterinarian. Let's invite him to the mix. But they don't talk to each other. And it's common to be seen by different medical facilities, and there's no link in the EHR system. And so I would hand carry the clinical trial with me. I would hand carry the scans. I would hand carry the lab results at every appointment because they were in the dark. Hey, did you know Dr. A just put him on this drug to combat that side effect? No. Are there contraindications? Well, yeah, there is. So I had to serve as that. And that is broken. That is just broken. I also speak with people that don't even have access to these treatments because they're in a rural area and they don't even have access to an AMC that are doing clinical trials, right? That's also a real hole in our system. So we've got to fix this. Now I have a question for you all, if you feel comfortable answering this. How many of you have had cancer or a family member, loved one with cancer? Look at all these, most everyone, right? How many of you have had liver cancer or a family member or loved one with liver cancer? Very few. But you guys can appreciate that this is a complex disease. There are so many moving parts to it, and it's so essential to assemble your support system. And thank you, Nicole, for inviting me to be part of the Eureka family. I feel a part of it now. And you are a part of my family now and this tribe of people that are battling liver cancer. And I appreciate that. I also was honored to get on the board of Blue Fairy, and they're a nonprofit, and they are dedicated just to HCC research, partnering with you guys and other industry partners, hoping for a cure, family, patient, education, and support. Also, a local organization called Cancer Care Point. And Cancer Care Point has free essential services for anyone in the Bay Area, in your backyard, that is affected by cancer. Counseling, education, support groups, a free wig boutique, you name it. and it's in our backyard. CanCare is a peer-to-peer support organization, and they match you with other patients or caregivers that have a similar cancer type or age or gender or location, whatever is most important to that client. One-on-one peer support. So I really advocate for anyone with cancer to access these services. Now, I know day in and day out, your job is hard and you get discouraged because you're battling this disease. And I applaud your work because you're battling a disease for which there are poor outcomes. Thank you for that. You've given us more time and more hope. What a gift, the most precious gift of all. So on those days where you're grumbling because, oh gosh, you've got another meeting and that department has too many meetings about that. And why do they even exist anyway? And there's a Gary in accounting is doing cherry picking on my expense report again. Hopefully you don't have a Gary in accounting. Those days are hard. My experiment didn't work out the way I wanted it to. It's discouraging, right? But what I can share with you 100% without a doubt is for those that are standing at the edge of that cliff facing that bear, there is nothing more important. Thank you. All right, I'd be happy to answer any questions that I can. I don't have a cure yet for cancer, but you guys are working on it.
Just mention about the quality of life, and the length of the life. What's your consideration while you're navigating the journey?
That's a good question. So I think the question is, it's about quality of life. And how do we gauge quality of life, right? What is it? Obviously, it would be wonderful to not have any of these treatment effects, right? But I think for Greg in particular, the way that we measured quality of life changed throughout the journey. And at the start of it, he would just get pissed and disappointed when he didn't have the stamina to do 18 holes of golf. So he had to back it down to 9 holes of golf. And then it became, I really want to be able to get out of bed in the day, during the day. That became hard. And so it changed. And it was okay because we were together, we always used to say. And instead of traveling to Maui, our world got smaller. So we would go and sit in the backyard and watch our birds. And that was okay because we were together. So the quality of life changed. When it became really unbearable for Greg was when the pain was too much and he'd have to be on morphine. That was no way for him to live. And that's when he made the decision, no more treatments. So I think it does, there's no set answer to that question other than it changes. And it's okay that it changes. Thank you for asking that question.
I have a question. I'm on the timeline part, sorry, more detail. So when he participated in the Himalaya trial, and when you do how much time you had to go through that bucket list?
That's a great question. So we're talking about timeline.
Yeah.
And so he was diagnosed in 2016. And we waited a year, and that's when we were called down to New Orleans in 2017. And then in 2018, beginning of 2018 was when he was enrolled in Himalaya.
It's 3 months, 2 to 3 months.
He was on Himalaya for 9 months.
Oh, 9 months.
Yeah. Okay. And so we were able to attack that bucket list, when we got back from New Orleans, that's when we decided to attack that bucket list.
So that's 2018, right?
Yes, exactly.
So when start kind of going downhill?
In 2019.
2019, beginning, at the beginning of the 2019.
2019.
You think it's a side effect, so it's a relapse?
Well, his tumors were growing.
Oh, okay.
And his tumors were growing, and a couple more popped up. And so that caused the pain based on the location of where those tumors were. But we were told 6 months to live when he left New Orleans, and he lived for 3.5 years. What a gift.
Right.
Yeah, what a gift that was. And then he was on, after he stopped responding to the clinical trial, he went on to Lenvima as the systemic course of therapy. And the internal bleeding started about that too.
After the
On Lenvima.
Okay.
Yeah. Great questions though. Did you have one?
Yeah, I do want to ask about the clinical trial part, right? I mean, obviously with the cancer diagnosis, trying to figure out, which clinical trial you get on. As a lay person, we know how much documentation our clinical team generates, right? The consensus forms, investigator brochure, et cetera. Like, what can a drug company do to make it less onerous for the patient? And
That's a great question. There are a few things. Patients don't know what that means, what a clinical trial is. So the work that you're doing to help educate patients on what a clinical trial is, most people think it's just like Greg actually used to wear this T-shirt to his infusions that said, "I'm a human lab rat looking for a cure for cancer." That's what he thought he was. But educating them on what the trials are, so they don't feel when knowledge is power, so they become empowered to ask about them, because doctors are not necessarily suggesting clinical trials. And so I think educating them on what it is, also to get enrolled. I mean, we were lucky. Look at where we live. With Stanford and UCSF, Sutter CPMC in our backyards. Most people don't have that. And so, it's important to have access to these trials, or at least know that there's an option and where that option is. And then the other thing about it is, when we were enrolled in Himalaya, we sat down with the case manager for 45 minutes, and she rattled off all of the side effects that could happen, which is like, okay, it's like a drug interaction. You look at the package insert for some of these drugs, it's like, okay, anything could happen. All right, well, and then bye-bye, good luck with that. I felt completely ill-equipped to handle them when they started happening. When do I freak out? When do I go to the ER? What do I do? What are the options to help combat some of these side effects? So I think that's something for you to keep in mind as you go into enrollment.
So like a educational video?
Yes, educational video would be great. And actually multimedia, because some people learn by video, some people learn by reading, some people learn by just talking with other people. We got a lot out of some of these online support communities, the people that were enrolled in the clinical trial, so we could bounce things off of. That was really powerful. But thank you for that question. All right, any other questions?
I have more questions.
Okay.
You talk about a good fit, right? The trials, the medication matching. Cancer is a very personal.
Yes.
Patients vary from patients in their own disease. Even they call it HCC, the old vary, right? So my question is, when you want to match a clinical trial, is a patient makes a call, or your doctor makes a call for you?
That's a great question. So who makes the call on what trial to get enrolled in is the question. And we were lucky because we have Katie Kelly, and she was the one that worked closely with Dr. Jennifer Guy, our hepatologist, who was our quarterback throughout the entire process at Sutter CPMC. They worked really closely together. So we relied on their partnership to introduce us to the different clinical trials. And so it was up to Katie Kelly to say, I think this would be the best one for you, because it depends, it's so patient dependent.
Yeah.
And Greg was a very compliant patient. a lot of patients, especially in this disease state, are not compliant.
Right.
And that can really damage the clinical trial.
Right.
So,
I ask a related question. If you,
Yeah.
So how you think the patient, because we're from our side, we want to collect lots of data points, a lot of samples, so that we can understand our drug better. But from the patient angle, how skeptical or resistant a patient is to all those, they say, sampling, blood draws, biopsies.
yeah. It's fatiguing,
Yeah.
right? And so less is more, but I tell you, it's important. So I would say for the most part, over the majority of people that I talk with, if it means more time, I'm all for it. Stick me and draw the labs that you need, scan me, biopsy, whatever you need. If it's gonna mean that I'm gonna live longer, they're all in. But as much as you can combine those visits, and that's where that medical center comes into play, because the good medical centers will combine your treatment schedules, your lab, and your doctor's visits all in one.
I see. Less burden.
Less burden on the patient. But you have to advocate for that. I have a client that she's going in with her husband who's having mobility issues even. She has to go in every other day, a lab over here, a scan over here, and then Dr. A over here every other day. So, but you have to advocate for that, because a lot of medical centers don't have their act together that way.
You worked with the Kaiser patients.
What's that?
Kaiser Permanente in the insurance, because they are like all in, right? So,
Right.
You know, do they have better like a patient management, like a treatment management, because they're all together, sort of?
Yeah, the question is about Kaiser and that business model. I would assume so, because it's all under one roof, right? Their electronic health records are all linked. And so I would assume that would be a more efficient model, but I don't know if Kaiser is able to support clinical trials. In fact, we were just talking about what a burden it can be on a medical center to really offer clinical trials. So, and I don't know enough about HCC at Kaiser to answer that question in particular. What I will say about Kaiser is they farm out transplants. So they don't do transplants at Kaiser. So we met people in New Orleans that were Kaiser members at Ochsner. And so they farmed all that out. So that's not under their roof.
Thank you.
Great questions, you guys.
So I was wondering, like, when you were starting your patient journey, once you guys got the diagnosis, I was wondering if you could talk more about, like, how'd you stumble upon Blueberry? How did you stumble upon the networks, the communities? Because obviously, like, for example, if you type HCC in Google, you're going to get hit with, like, all of the basic definitions of what HCC is. I mean, you'd have to go 20 pages deep before you find Blueberry, before you find another work, just because of how search engine optimization works. So, like, how did you find those communities that were able to, like, help support you?
That's a great question. And it's about patient education at the beginning of the journey. I was really surprised because I've been in healthcare my whole career. And I was exposed to it on the other side. And I was shocked at how little patient education there was to demystify this journey. And so I was ravenous. I just went online and I tried to gain as much information as I can. And that's not really, I don't recommend. But I will say that I joined an online support group called Inspire. And Inspire is an online community of people for all cancer types. And they have specific communities for liver cancer. And that's how I learned about Blueberry. And that's when I met Andrea Wilson. She interviewed us both. She interviewed both Greg and I to extract our story, and helped us. And she helped me. Greg was like, I don't need help. But she helped me navigate all of that. Yeah. But I think Eureka can do a really good job at, when you do get to that point, having a patient portal so that all the questions are in there, question and answers, and also a support community would be awesome. And patient, like at the 8th grade reading level. Yeah. Yeah. Great questions, though. All
Do you
right.
mind if I ask a
Of
more
course.
detailed question?
Yeah.
So because Greg took several different treatment and took in the trial, so do you have any, like, he can feel that he's benefiting from the treatment before he sees his CT scan?
Yes.
He does, right?
Yeah, that's a great question. So did Greg feel like the question was, did Greg feel like he was benefiting from the treatment before that scan?
Right.
And yes, he did, because of his, he felt the fatigue lifted. He was able to eat.
Mhm.
He had the ability to play, more of his golf game, to surf,
Mhm.
or at least get in the ocean. And so he felt that. But I tell you, he became, with the blood pressure fluctuations, he became really unsteady on his feet, because his blood pressure would just plummet, and that was really scary. So those days that he was feeling good were steady Eddie, and I can golf. There is a thing called scanxiety, though. So a week before that scan,
Yeah.
I didn't sleep.
Oh.
That's a thing. Yeah.
Also waiting for a verdict.
Exactly. Waiting for the verdict is the worst.
Yeah. I know.
Absolutely. The really, one of the most difficult parts of the journey was when he was diagnosed. It was November 2nd of 2016. That's when we were told. And the hepatologist, this new doc, said, well, Stanford has a great, and they're in Palo Alto, has a great program. And we thought, oh, Stanford, right? Well, I will share that was a miserable experience. It took us 4 weeks to get an appointment to see a doctor. So we're given this diagnosis, and we have to wait 4 weeks just to see a doctor. Can you imagine what those weeks were like?
Yeah.
Oh, they were awful. It was hell. We finally got to the appointment, and the doctor we were seeing had no clue, had done zero homework, had no scans. We were coming into her cold. I had to go drive and get the scans and bring it to her office. 2 weeks later, she said, I don't think he has HCC. I think it might be cholangiocarcinoma. And their doctors were disagreeing on the diagnosis. So that's when we said, no more. And we went up to Sutter CPMC and got into the care of Dr. Jennifer Guy, who was amazing. And so she got right in. She had all the homework done. She was able to give us all of the different treatment options. Thankfully, transplant was on the table. And so she's the one that quarterbacked us all the way through to the end. So we were very fortunate that way.
How did you find her?
What's that?
How did you find her?
His hepatologist was shocked at the experience that we had with Stanford. And so he and Dr. Guy worked closely together. And even though she was in San Francisco and Palo Alto would be more convenient, we opted for, and we're just so glad that we did. Referral. Yeah.
Were you looking at the AFP level?
Yes. He was one of those patients that was an indicator. Yeah.
How did you feel? Your blood pressure also fluctuates the AFP level?
Yeah, they were up and down and up and down and up and down. And there, I tried not to spend too much anxiety with it, because after a treatment, they can be wonky.
Mm-hmm.
But when they started to steadily climb, that's when we knew he was, the tumors were growing.
The patient community for HCC, do you feel like they're fairly well aware of like AFP, like you were just talking about? Do you, like, if they know that acronym, they know, like, they're watching?
No.
No, okay, so there needs to be more education on, okay,
They'd have no clue, especially now that it was introduced, UHCC, unresectable,
Mhm.
UHCC. They don't know, yeah, liver cancer.
yes, that's
yeah.
what they're, yeah, no, fine,
Yeah, that's a good question.
it's good to know.
All right.
Allow me one more from.
Sure.
You talk a lot about hope,
Yes.
right? I want to ask a question from down there. How much you think is a lot of false hopes, hypes these days?
Well, hope
Yeah.
changes, right?
Yeah.
And so just think about it. In 2016, there was just one therapy. And then all of a sudden, the market was like, Lenvima got on the market the same day that Greg was able to get on it, the same day that it was FDA approved. And so it was like following science. And so we always felt very hopeful.
Okay.
We knew after we got back from New Orleans that he didn't have decades. We knew that. And so that's why we were so wanting to celebrate every day.
Okay.
And so, but hope changes. Like at the beginning, we were just cholangiocarcinoma is really bad, right? That's a terrible cancer. So we were hoping it wasn't that and just liver cancer. So hope changed.
Okay.
When we got to liver cancer, it was like, oh, transplant. We had hope.
Mm.
When we got home, we had hope that the clinical trial would work. We knew it wasn't, going to last decades. So hope changed and we grasped onto that. Always. Yeah, always.
It dealt with disappointment.
What's that?
It dealt with disappointments.
Yes. I love these questions because sometimes when I talk with folks, they don't feel comfortable asking questions because it's such a personal story, but it's important. And I applaud Eureka for wanting to hear the patient voice, especially at this phase of your journey. A lot of companies don't. So I applaud that.
We ask a lot of questions regarding the disease, and my question is, how were you holding up? How were you holding up along?
Oh, that's a good question. How was I holding? I was a wreck. How was I holding up?
And how did you?
I was a wreck at first, I wasn't sleeping, and I wasn't, because when you're a caregiver, this, your health takes a back seat. You are 100% focused in on your loved one, and I was, and don't do that. There's a reason why you board an airplane and they say put your mask on first before helping others. There's a lot of truth to that if you're caring for a loved one with a chronic illness. So it took me a year before I realized I was in bad shape. And one thing that really struck me is I wasn't able to be present for Greg. And I wanted to be my best self for Greg. And because he was getting snappy, his personality changed. He wasn't a chill guy. He became snappy, and I would react to that. And that was, so it took time, but I finally got there and the light bulb went off. I wanted to be the best person I could be for him with this limited time that we had. So walking in nature, making sure that was a priority, meditating, and yeah. Very good. Well, thank you all so much. And thank you so much.